the team that was #1 ranked in the world since 2015, but never managed to achieve anything. Belgium's golden generation, what went wrong? This video, we're going to find out. So tell me in the comments what you think was the problem for Belgium over this period, and also subscribe while you're there. Straight into the video then. They recently pipped to the top, or dethroned from first place in the FIFA World Rankings by Brazil, surprisingly, despite Argentina winning the World Cup and Brazil only making the quarterfinals, I believe, which was a bit weird. But we're looking at Belgium in this video, so how come Belgium never won anything with this golden generation? So we go back to the start with the 2014 World Cup is my starting point for this golden generation. They topped their group 3-3 versus Algeria, South Korea and Russia. So a probably easy group you'd say for Belgium, but before this Belgian football wasn't massive. They had no real previous greats to aspire to. So this was the beginning of the start of probably Belgium's best ever footballing era, and with some great young talents coming through as well. You had, let's look at the group. You had the rise of Vertonghen in the group. They only conceded 1, and he was a key part of that, with Courtois as well coming through, I think at Atletico Madrid at the time, also proving key for this period for Belgium. Then in the group you also had Mertens getting himself a goal, maybe 2, and he was also crucial in sort of the upbringing of Belgian football over the last 10 years, and he was definitely sort of the main man for them in this. Then in the round of 16, it was 0-0 after full time against the USA, but then it ended 2-1 after extra time. De Bruyne and Lukaku scoring. Lukaku specifically announcing himself on the world stage, and with what he was doing in the Premier League at the time, is really putting Belgian football out there with what that group of players could do on an international stage. Then in the quarterfinals, they did have a 1-0 loss to Argentina, but for a young team to only lose 1-0 to eventual finalists, and a team that some would argue were maybe unlucky to not win it in 2014, and they're also against a peak Lionel Messi, and they only lost 1-0. For a good, solid, young team, that was quite an achievement for them to reach quarterfinals. I'm not sure back then it was quite expected, especially because the team was so young. But they had good performances from their young team, and they were now officially ranked the best team, and that was for heading in to Euro 2016. And this is where sort of it seems like the golden generation was never going to come to fruition. So let's look at it. You had Group E, they're in Italy, the Republic of Ireland and Sweden, and they were only able to come second in that group after beating the Republic of Ireland and Sweden, but losing to Italy on the first day 2-0. And this isn't awful, because they did what they had to do against the 2 weaker teams, and the 2-0 loss against Italy wasn't ideal. They were definitely a strong team going into that tournament, so not a bad group stage for Belgium there. In the round of 16, they had a 4-0 battering of Hungary, which sort of really showed that they meant business, and they were serious about competing at the top as a footballing nation. But before we move on, there are newer, exciting young stars coming through in this tournament. Alderweireld especially, he's important for the future, because it was sort of Vertonghen and Alderweireld ended up being the future centre-back partnership for Belgium, and that's an important part of the golden generation, because those two were both definitely pretty solid Belgium centre-backs, and considering how good they both were, a bit surprising they both ended up at Tottenham. Anyway, they also had Batshuayi, who people thought would have a brilliant career, didn't quite end well, and Carrasco as well, another one thought to have a brilliant career, who is in 2022 starting to show a bit of that potential we all thought he had back then. Eden Hazard was now performing at his peak for the Red Devils in 2016, and people were excited about it. It was a young team, but not too inexperienced, and it wasn't a too old team, which you'll notice is going to be a problem later on for Belgium in this video. So the next game then, they had a disappointing 3-1 loss to Wales. Wales, the massive underdog going into that game, yet this Belgian golden generation, sort of coming into its peak with a lot of the players, managed to lose 3-1. Robson Kaluri had his little brilliant Cruyff turn goal against them, and it was not a good moment for Belgian football. This was a golden generation, a team that was meant to become the next European international powerhouse, but then lost really disappointingly to Wales, who were not one of the best teams at the time, although they had a run all the way to the semi-finals of that tournament. So they were definitely a good team that tournament, but a team nonetheless Belgium should have been beating. So after that, it was sort of the start of the problems, I would say. But Roberto Martinez takes over, which could be another issue in itself for 2018, 2020, and 2022, which we will talk about. So Roberto Martinez, he was at Wigan and did do pretty well before. No, he's at Swansea. He did all right before he left to Wigan, and Wigan he did decent, and he won the FA Cup with them, which was an absolute miracle. But Roberto Martinez was also a man who ended up sacked at Wigan, which is not what you want for a national team manager, to be sacked at a lower Premier League club. It's a bit like Southgate. They're not quite cut out for it. Although Southgate's done decent with England, he's not quite at the same level as the really good managers. He was also sacked at Everton, which is another thing to point out, after he had some decent cup runs to the semi-finals of competitions, but overall he just wasn't really good enough, and he disappointed over the entirety of Everton's season, having a huge drop-off from his first season with them, which was pretty good, to his second season, which was pretty average at best. So Roberto Martinez taking over the Belgian golden generation for the 2018 World Cup. Let's look at how they did. So they stormed the 2018 World Cup group, to be fair to them. Panama and Tunisia, both batterings, and also got a 1-0 win against England, showing that this tournament was one where they're ready to take on the better, more higher ranked nations in world football, because England might not have been in the best state at the time, but they were still a pretty high ranking team, I believe still in the top 10. So they did go out there and prove that they can beat teams like that. And this is where people were worried that the golden generation for Belgium was over. In the round of 16, they go 2-0 down to Japan, and it's looking like crisis time for Belgium. Roberto Martinez looked like his team was imploding, but luckily they had Afro Man himself, Maro and Fellaini, to bail them out with a header. I think Chadley got a last minute, and I think the Tongan scored an absolute wonder goal of a header as well in that game. Lots of headers, but what it showed is that Belgium, as their players got a bit older, pretty much all of them in their primes now, players like the Tongan, De Bruyne, Hazard, all of them like playing at their best really. And they also are showing a bit of determination and grit and team spirit to fight back in that game against Japan, and eventually won out 3-2 winners. So very good for Belgium in 2018 so far, looking like this could be their time. Prove it even more, hammer in the nail to show that it really could have been their time. One of the favourites, Brazil, they have to face in the quarterfinals, and they managed to take an early 2-goal lead, absolutely shocking the Brazilians, and just in the end they hold out and win 2-1 in the end. Yet again showing their team spirit, the defensive attitude as well as the offensive attitude, and are a team that is well rounded enough to perform and hopefully for their case win the World Cup. However, it wasn't to be, because in the next game against France, I believe, they stuttered to a 1-0 defeat. And again, for Belgium, it's a what could have been case, because they're in the semi-finals again, but France, the eventual winners, managed to squeak to a 1-0 win over them. Not convincing, but Belgium, they will see that as a missed opportunity where they could have got to the final and would have fancied themselves against Croatia, but in the end, it wasn't good enough. However, they did manage to make themselves what should be the way they officially rank it, the third best team in the world by coming third at that World Cup. So, moving on, 2020 Euros that were delayed until 2021 because of COVID, obviously. So, they had a more mature squad, we'll start with that. A more mature squad, a bit older squad, but a squad that you were expecting to do big things, and really, they did well. They breezed the group of Denmark, Finland and Russia, and obviously Denmark versus Finland is a game the Christian Eriksen incident happened, which definitely affected Denmark that tournament, for better performance-wise, but for worse, obviously, because Eriksen, their main man, was out. But Belgium breezed that group 3-3 yet again, and this was looking like maybe their time to finally do something at a major international tournament. So then, in the round of 16, they face Portugal and get a decent 1-0 win, but then in the quarterfinals are outclassed by an Italy side who did end up eventual winners. And it's another case where Belgium, they have to play one of the best teams in the tournament early on, maybe before they've gotten the full swing, and maybe if they'd had easier runs to the semi-finals than finals, we could have really seen Belgium actually win something. But like we've already said, it just wasn't to be, and potentially missed opportunities for Belgium. So Euro 2020, they're then out. But then all eyes are now on the World Cup 2022 for Belgium, seen as their last chance for success with the golden generation they had, with lots of them getting older, which is a key issue. But that is after the first game against Canada, where simply this Belgian golden generation were very, very lucky against a team ranked well below them in the world rankings. Player-wise, you'd have to say Belgium are pretty much better all over the pitch, with the exception of Alphonso Davies. And Canada absolutely dominated them. And the problem was that Canada missed a penalty, and Belgium, through their superior quality, managed to get a goal that gave them a 1-0 win. So not the best start performance-wise, but a good start result-wise for Belgium. So, moving into the second game against Morocco, yet again, Belgium are the favourites to win. Can they throw in a better performance is the question. The answer to that would have been no, as Morocco played their game. Belgium played into their hands as they allowed Morocco to defend, who defended brilliantly, by the way, and then score on the counter-attack twice to put Belgium down. I mean, Belgium that whole tournament didn't look good whatsoever, and that game against Morocco really exemplified that. So now a win and a loss, that meant that Belgium had to go into the final game of the group versus Croatia and win. And this is where I highlight that the problem for Belgium's golden generation was simply just missed opportunities, not performing at the right times, I guess you say. Because against Croatia, it's 0-0. There's chances for both teams. Belgium probably having the better chances, especially towards the end, as Croatia were going through with a draw, but Belgium needed a win. And this is where the missed chances come in, because Romelu Lukaku has 4, maybe 5 clear-cut, very easy chances. A striker of what should be immense quality should be finishing those, but he somehow scuffs every single one of the chances, hitting the post with one of them. I think he hit the post with 2, maybe 3 of them. Other chances just completely scuffed, like the final one where it sort of hits his stomach and he just didn't really react to it quick enough as well. Huge stinkers, and because of that, Belgium draw 0-0 and are consequently knocked out of the 2022 World Cup, ending the hopes and dreams of the golden generation. And with them getting knocked out of the 2022 World Cup, there were clearly issues amongst the squad, because after the Canada game, De Bruyne gave a brutally honest interview saying that the Belgian team, he thought in his opinion, were too old and were only outsiders for the competition, which ended up causing huge uproar in the dressing room, as there were fights then, I think between De Bruyne and Moynier, the right back, after the Morocco game, because the tensions were so high and they weren't happy with what De Bruyne had said in the media. So just a complete collapse. Roberto Martinez lost control. The players clearly weren't listening to him anymore, and if that Belgian team, who was still, like, they had so much quality in that 2022 squad, they really could have been threats for that tournament. Although I do highlight 2018 and 2020 as the 2 tournaments they should have performed and almost did, getting knocked out by pretty much the team's best in both. Yeah, they got knocked out by the winners in both those tournaments. So if they'd just performed in both those games, we could have seen Belgium's golden generation win a major tournament. However, they could not perform in those games, getting outperformed. And for me, Romelu Lukaku against Croatia is exactly what the dark truth behind Belgium's golden generation was: missed opportunities.